people out there who are capable of doing things that we're not capable of or not very good at, right? There are people out there who are good at cooking or good at playing video games, but it's not like every person you encounter who is better than you at something intimidates you. There are particular things that we're sensitive to that make us feel intimidated. And this is what's really wild, is what makes us feel intimidated is actually identification with the person. When we see ourselves in another human being, but that person does a better job of being us than we do, that's when we feel intimidated. When we look at someone else and we say, I could do this if I were different. If I was smarter, I would be like this person. If I was more disciplined, I would be like this person. They're just a version of me that's like better than me, right? They're more articulate, they're a little bit better looking, or this person made the right choices when I made the wrong choices. So if I had stayed in school, or if I had chosen to become, not switch into pre-med and stayed in computer science or whatever, if I decided not to go to college and play pro League of Legends or Valorant or whatever. So what we see, what actually triggers the sense of intimidation, this is really important to understand, is not that this person is different from you. It's that for the most part, they're similar, except for one thing. And that is the quality which you feel is intimidating, right? So really think about that for a second, that what gets evoked as intimidation is actually the way that you relate to the person and that you can see yourself in that person. Except, so intimidation is not about that person being different, it's actually about that person being the same. And so the real problem with this is when we see ourselves in someone else and we think to ourselves, wow, I could be that if I ... Our natural reaction is to beat ourselves up, right? Because then you start to look at your life and you start to regret. You're like, oh, I should have done this differently. Or if I had woken up every day, or if I had studied harder, or if I had, spent some time working on my appearance or going to the gym, then I could look like that person. So as we beat ourselves up and we point out our shortcomings, what does that do psychologically? That makes us feel more insecure. It reinforces the insecurity, and the more that we reinforce the insecurity, the more ammo there is for us to be intimidated. And because what is it that's actually fueling that feeling of intimidation? It's actually our own insecurities. And this is why intimidation is so hard to overcome, right? And there may be some people out there that give you answers like, oh, you just gotta do it. You gotta put yourself out there, right? And as you listen to these people who say, just put yourself out there, you're like, bro or girl, I don't think you understand what it's like when I put myself out there. You can put yourself out there because you're different from me. That doesn't work for me. And why is that? It's because you feel really bad, you start to regret even more, you start to beat yourself up, and then it feeds the insecurity, and now you put yourself out there once, and now you're more insecure. So what happens the next time you put yourself out there? It's easier to feel intimidated. And then you beat yourself up again, and then you're like, wow, all these other people can put them even more, and then you try again because everyone's telling you, just put yourself out there, bro. You try a third time, and each time you go through the cycle, it gets worse. And now it makes sense why you can't put yourself out there and why you think it's a bad idea and why it doesn't work for you, because it literally doesn't work for you. So let's understand a couple of things. First thing to really acknowledge, if you can, but this may actually come at the end, is that if you're there, you deserve to be there. If you get invited to a party and you feel intimidated by other people, you still got invited to the party. So unless you're literally trespassing, right? Or somewhere where you really don't belong. I'm not saying what your mind thinks you don't belong. Unless you're trespassing or breaking a law, you actually belong there. And that's something that I experienced a ton when I started residency at Harvard Medical School. I felt really intimidated. I was like, look at all these amazing people out there. Turns out I'm pretty amazing too. And so are you. And the second thing that we're going to tell you to do may be a little bit scary, but it's really, really effective, okay? So if we think a little bit about intimidation, we recognize a quality in that person that we think is good, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be intimidated by it. They're so articulate. The other problem with intimidation is that we're in our own heads. And you may notice that the more you are in your own head, the worse the situation becomes. Oh my God, what is this person going to think? What should I say? I don't belong here. I should go home. I should run away. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. You're all up in here, so you're not able to enjoy the experience at all. You're not actually able to participate. So what we need to do is externalize your attention. And the way that we're going to do that is going to be absolutely terrifying, but it works really well, okay? So what we actually want to do is express appreciation for the thing that we think is pretty cool. So recognize that when you feel intimidation, the flip side of that coin is actually appreciation, because you're seeing something in someone else that is like a positive quality. That's why you feel intimidated, because you don't have it. So one thing that you can actually do, which is really wild, is walk up to that person and say, hey, I really appreciate ... So if someone gives a good presentation in class and you feel like that person's presentation is way better than yours, after class, walk up to him and say, hey, I thought your presentation was fantastic. I particularly like the way that you did A, B, and C. Now, this may sound absolutely terrifying, and we're going to help you all with that, but let's understand why it works. So I recently saw a really interesting study that if you look at people who are depressed, people who have mood disorders and active depressive episodes, the idea is that normally they need help, right? So what we should really do is try to help them a lot because they're depressed and they need help. But there's a study that actually found that when people who are depressed help other people, it actually improves their symptoms. So sometimes what we need to do is take that feeling of intimidation and recognize that you can't be intimidated unless you appreciate or respect something about someone. That's the only way that it can happen, unless they're trying to intimidate you, obviously. And so then what we actually want to do is, instead of giving into the negative manifestation of this emotion, what we actually want to do is kind of flip it around and express some appreciation. And you all may have heard about things like expressing gratitude and like changing your mindset and all this kind of crap. This is literally how you do it. You walk up to that person and say, hey, I really appreciate the way that you presented that. That was a really cool presentation. And now suddenly what you've done is you've externalized it a little bit. We're going to help you all if you're all thinking, oh my God, but then what? I can't say that. We're going to help you. Don't worry. Wait with me. Bear with me, okay? So first thing we've done is externalize. We've also engaged with that person. So instead of retreating from it, which causes narrowing of your life and closing of doors and opportunities, we're actually like not being intimidated by it, right? You may feel intimidation, but you can go and you can express appreciation because that's authentic. That's what's really cool. It's not actually being fake. It's actually channeling something that you feel towards this person. Okay, but then what? And that's where you can sort of follow it up with an open-ended question. So you can walk up to someone, you can say, hey, I really appreciate insert quality that I am intimidated by. Can you tell me a little bit about why you chose that as a topic? Or, let's say you're intimidated by someone's appearance. I know this sounds kind of weird, but this is something that I've done that works really well. You can walk up to someone at a party and say, hey, you're really rocking that jacket. Like that looks lit, right? And just think about that. How would someone feel if you walked up to them and you said that? Now, if you sort of play it too far, I'm saying say one thing. Don't keep on, oh, and your hair is beautiful, and I love your skin, and I love your shoes, and I love everything about you. You're just so Don't do that. That's terrifying, okay? So just say the one thing. Don't be like verbal diarrhea on them of appreciation. So just say one thing. Hey, I really appreciate this thing. And then follow it up with some kind of question, like that's a rockin' jacket. How did you decide to wear that today, right? Or if someone's giving a presentation, you can say, hey, I really loved the way that you sort of put together that table, or that meme at the end was brilliant. Can you tell me a little bit about why you chose this topic? So ask an open-ended question. It shouldn't be a yes or no question. That's really important. And then just ask that. And then it doesn't have to be a long interaction. So here's the other thing, because what people are oftentimes terrified is like, what do they say then, right? And that's where it's like, sometimes if you even go up to someone and compliment them, who's embarrassed now? Biatch, right? Because when you walk up to someone, you say, hey, this is a really fantastic presentation. I love that meme at the end. You just say it with a smile, and then they're like, oh my God, right? And suddenly they're feeling embarrassed, and you've made them feel good, right? Which is pretty cool. And so if you're worried about how to extract yourself from the conversation, you can even just say, hey, so like they say, oh, this is how I chose to put together this presentation. So you ask your question, and then they're going to come back to you, and maybe it'll turn into a conversation, but you're terrified. How do I make it into a conversation? You can't make it into a conversation. You don't need to make it into a conversation. You went there to say your piece. If they engage with you, engage back, right? So we're going to hit the tennis ball across the court. We're going to wait for it to come back. If it doesn't come back, you can say, well, I just wanted to share that with you. Awesome presentation, right? And then you can just walk away. Just extract yourself from the conversation. It's okay. You just walk up and say, hey, I thought you did a fantastic job. Pleasure to meet you. My name is so-and-so. I was curious about this. Thank you so much. And then you just walk out. And so what does this do? This is really important because it does a couple of really key things. The first is it allows us to not retreat, right? This is what's really important. And then we'll develop some degree of tolerance. We're not giving in to the intimidation. The second is that it takes that authentic gap between you and the other person and sort of like